Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Denise Young. I'm head of communications at the International Council for Science, based here in Paris, and I'm really happy to welcome you to this session on bringing compassion back into our work through mindfulness practices. The session is around 40 minutes, and I just want to let you know that one of our speakers will lead a short meditation, guided meditation at the end. Look forward to doing that with you together. So just want to introduce our speakers. To my right here, I have Marion Chaygneaud-Dupuy. She is CEO of Global Nomad, and she's a longtime meditation practitioner who studied Tibetan Buddhism in India and China. And she's based in Lhasa currently, and she's a social entrepreneur. And she is also the first European woman to climb Mount Everest 3 times, leading the Clean Everest campaign. And then next to Marion is Prisca Bauer. She is a trained medical doctor and a researcher in neuroscience. She's currently based at the Brain Dynamics and Cognition team in the Neuroscience Research Center in Lyon in France, working with Antoine Lutz, who's a world-leading researcher in the neurobiology of meditation. So before we get started, I wonder if I could just ask you for a quick show of hands. Who in the room already has a regular meditation practice? So good, more than half. And how about, are there some people in the room who have been thinking about it but haven't really been able to commit? Karina, very nice. Larry, okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so maybe we can talk about that a little bit later when we kind of look at personal practice. So I just want to say I really, really enjoyed preparing for this session. And we have had a couple of conversations, yesterday and on the phone and so on. And it got me thinking a lot about how this conversation about compassion, about mindfulness, is really kind of like a subcurrent that's connecting all of the other stuff that's going on in this forum. There are so many conversations in the forum about being a better leader, about collaboration, about inclusion, about diversity, about teamwork, and so on. And all of these things are somehow connected to these things, these practices, the intention that you bring to work, the kind of self that you show up with. And it just made me think that there are a lot of conversations out there about how we want multiple metrics, and that success and money and GDP is maybe not quite enough. And there is this kind of profound, deep longing for wisdom, for caring, for connectedness that that makes this conversation about the connection between the corporate world and what used to be seen as the spiritual world very, very interesting. So, and also I wanted to say a few words about technology. I don't know if any of you saw, there was an article in The Guardian this morning, which was very timely, talking about how people in Silicon Valley, for example, the engineer who created the Facebook like button, is now detoxing himself from his own creations by installing parental controls onto his iPhone. So that's really sort of disturbing and interesting at the same time. And then the last thing I wanted to say was about the Tibetan masters often talk about every great religion has an enemy. And in Buddhism, the enemy is distraction. So how timely is that in the world where, we are all addicted to our phones and our apps, and yet we long so deeply for better focus, better connectedness, to be better humans somehow. So with that, I'm going to turn to Marion, and I want to ask you, actually, the session is about compassion, but I think there's a lot of confusion about what we mean by the definition of compassion. So what do you mean when you talk about compassion? And is it a synonym for caring, for empathy, for altruism, or is it something else?
Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here. First I'd like to talk about altruism as a foundation. Is when we are of great concern for others, when we put others as more important for us as important as ourselves, or more important than ourselves. And on that basis, when we are concerned by others' suffering, then it becomes compassion. And the difference between compassion and empathy is empathy is when you feel the other person's feelings and you get absorbed by his or her feelings. When in compassion, you actually know the other person suffering, and you create a space within yourself that's giving warmth and loving kindness, that is actually healing the other person. So it's more like in action, and it leads us to caring. So caring, taking care of the other person, that's putting compassion into action. But to give an example of how this differentiations works, I'd like to talk about my personal story on compassion, my journey on compassion. So it started when I was 16 years old. I was in Calcutta, in the slums in Calcutta, and I was working in a leprosy mobile clinics in the slums. So I was so touched by sickness and death of the people that I met there. And actually I got this overwhelming feeling that, and I didn't know what to do with that. But I had a shift, a very strong breakthrough that I wanted to dedicate my life to actually serve others, to be able to alleviate suffering. And I didn't know how to sustain this this willingness of being there for others, to serve others. So that's how at age 16, between 16 years old and 18 years old, I decided to train myself into compassion. So I went to a monastery in Darjeeling, and I spent 4 years training myself on compassion, love and compassion. And from that point, then I was sent to work in Tibet since 2002 for 15 years now to develop a network of social entrepreneurs, and that's what I'm doing now. So I would say that the training I got helped me to sustain this motivation that I had at the beginning to serve others, and that this motivation would lead all my choices in life. And that's still what I'm doing now, and that's what I'm planning to do in the future. So so far.
Thanks. And I mean, just following up on that, because we're interested in this idea of compassion and how it relates to the workplace and becoming better leaders and things like that. Can you give some examples from your work in Tibet where you were supporting some of these entrepreneurs to bring more of a compassionate attitude into their lives and their work?
So I guess I'd like to speak about the Clean Everest campaign that we are running right now. That's the ongoing project, so it's very close to my heart right now. So I'm leading a team of 50 Tibetan mountain guides on the mountain, on Mount Everest, to clean up all the garbage. And so we are collaborating with the Western commercial expeditions, big entrepreneurs who are paying for going to the top of Mount Everest, and they come from all over the world, and their only goal is to actually reach the top, and so they leave quite a lot of waste garbage on the mountain. So as we are collecting all this waste with this team of 50 mountain guides from Tibet, our vision of the mountain is to actually to keep it pure, because in traditional way of Tibetan nomads living in harmony with nature, there is no separation between man and the mountain. Basically, the relationship is very strong. Like they are, Tibetan nomads are connected to themselves, connected to others, connected with the nature in a very natural way, very obvious way. Actually, it's very connected to what the young NGO leader told this morning in Africa, where nomadic people have actually the ancestral knowledge, traditional knowledge on how to protect the nature, and how this is very precious knowledge that need to be shared and need to be valued. So we are doing very similar things, so that actually Tibetan mountain guides should be able to explain to Western mountaineers how important to them is the mountain, and to keep the mountain pure. Their relationship with the mountain is very sacred. And to do that, so we train guides in cultural mediation, in a way of that to understand the other person perspective, like perspective taking, and to understand their needs. Okay, Westerners, what they need. They need actually to reach the top of Everest, and they don't want the Everest to actually be so polluted that there will be no Everest to climb anymore. So, okay, that's their goal, and that their need, like to come and climb. And for the Tibetans, is also like to be able to make a living. So they also need Mount Everest, and they need to keep it clean. So it's really like to find the common needs, and to relate to the other person needs as this needs kind of foundation that people can relate to each other and connect to each other, and they can take the other person's perspective, and this mutual understanding. This is what compassion is about, actually, in our work environment, is to understand the other person. And we can be trained in that, and that's what we're doing. We're doing training for people to try to understand themselves better, and to understand the other better. So that's one example. Yeah,
thanks for that. I think a lot of the times, sort of in common parlance, compassion can be mixed up with ideas of like pity, or which is not technically what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay, so I have a couple of questions for Prisca, and I guess I'd like you to talk about the research, because that's your field. And there have been a lot of interesting advances in the research recently, specifically showing that different meditation techniques are training different parts of the brain. So could you just talk a little bit about this, and also relate it back to what Marion was saying about compassion?
Right. So first of all, I'm really delighted to be here and to talk about this really important subject with you all. So research into meditation and into mindfulness is relatively young. It's about 30 years ago that it first started, and in those 30 years we've learned an awful lot. And I think the most important thing that we've learned is that through a mental training, and actually meditation and mindfulness practice is a mental training. And through practicing every day, we can actually change the way our brains are wired. There has been research done on expert meditators, monks and nuns, who've done loads of years of meditation. And compared to people who've never meditated, their brains are actually wired differently. And now recent research shows that through practicing every day, just similar to going to the gym every day, we mere mortals who are not monks and nuns can also progressively change things in the brain. So what are those changes? First of all, mindfulness practice is about stabilizing our attention, learning to be in the present moment, learning to not have our mind wandering off into the future and back to the past. And we actually see that this sort of training stabilizes attention also when we ask people to do certain tasks in the lab, but also in the MRI scanners, for example, we see that their brain is activated differently when they learn this sort of practices. And coming back to the compassion and empathy, neuroscience is now also showing that actually the networks activated in the brain are different for perspective taking. So that is, can I understand what the other person is saying to me? Can I see their perspective? For empathy, which is, can I feel what the other person is feeling? And for compassion, which is actually going further. So you need perspective taking for empathy and for compassion. But to go to compassion, you don't necessarily need the empathy. So you can have, I guess if I try to generalize what Marion was saying, compassion is understanding the other person's perspective, connecting with them, and actually wanting to go into action to help them achieve that goal. So it's really about connecting with people. And neuroscience is supporting that there is different mechanisms at work for those three processes, so to speak. And I think this is a very important distinction to really distinguish empathy and compassion, because they also have very different effects on our lives. And there is research that shows that, for example, doctors, I trained as a doctor, and I was very empathic. I worked in neurosurgery, so I was dealing with very sick people. I was very empathic. I could really feel their pain. But I didn't learn to make this gesture of compassion. In med school, I didn't learn to actually give something that was empowering them, that was giving them something of warmth. I only learned to feel their pain and not to deal with it. And there's research showing that this is actually one aspect that contributes to burnout. When you feel a lot of empathy, but you can't, there is no coping mechanism with that, such as compassion, people are at much higher risk of facing burnout or depression than when you learn to work with it through compassion, in the same way that Marion did in the Tibetan monastery, in the Indian monastery. Sorry.
So, I mean, we had a show of some people came in afterwards, but we had half of the room at least the already regular practitioners. So I just wanted to dig into this thing about how I'm fascinated at the motivation that brings people to meditation and mindfulness practices, and I have the observation that a lot of it, especially if we look at leaders and middle management people who come in through kind of corporate routes, often it's very much a me focus. I want better mental attention. I want to prioritize. I want to create quality time for myself and so on. And so those, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the research is saying that there are certain techniques that serve that goal very well, and those are the sort of the mind-focused techniques, I don't know what you call them, there's a bunch of them. But the specific loving kindness, compassion, practices are leading you in a different direction, and I would imagine that is supporting more of an other focus. My relationship with others, with the world. And I think when we talk about societal transformation and the imperative of decarbonizing our societies and being better planetary stewards, these compassionate techniques are actually a much more powerful suite of weapons. Is that more or less correct?
I would say so. So there has been a lot of research on mindfulness, which is very focused on stabilizing our attention. But now we are also, for the last 10 years, there's also been a lot of research into compassion and loving kindness meditation. And this shows that this is activating a different parts of the brain, just like working out different muscles in the gym. And what is also showing is that practicing mindfulness alone, without compassion, is actually not giving the desired effect, because you can be very effective. And actually, the fact that mindfulness is being practiced, for example, in the military is not really a place that is associated with compassion. So I would say that actually, and it's very, very hard to stay on your cushion to meditate for half an hour if you don't have a little bit of compassion with yourself. So it really starts with compassion with yourself.
Just one last question before I open it up to the audience. I think, actually, it's a two-part question. Are there any downsides to meditation? Because we've heard a lot, science is telling us that it's all good, but are there any actual downsides?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and actually there is some research starting to be about the downsides of meditation, and especially so in people who are already facing psychiatric or psychological distress, if not guided well, it can be a problem. And I would say that actually mindfulness and compassion are in a balance. You need both. And otherwise, it can get out of balance, and then you just end up being a very efficient machine. And you need both. And my own meditation teacher calls it kindfulness. So I would like to inspire you to practice kindfulness rather than mindfulness.
Should we take some questions from the audience? Would anyone like to ask some questions? We only have 3 microphones, so just shout.
Right, so when I was a doctor, I wish I could have, I'll just repeat the question, what compassionate mechanisms I could have used as a doctor that I've learned now. I think it's in very small things, to be, for example, to be able to put a hand on someone's shoulder and to really honestly say, I'm going to do my best for you. To really have that connection and to really have it very deep and to really have the motivation. May you be well and may you be happy. I think that is something that I would have liked to know back then.
It's a complementary question, but how did you find out about meditation? Because obviously you didn't learn that in medical school, so how did you find out?
So I think most people actually come to meditation through a personal crisis. So I went through a burnout, and then I stumbled upon a book of the Dalai Lama called The Art of Happiness. And I thought that I need to read that. So that was the start of the journey. Thank you.
I have a quick question for 2 of you. I'm always interested in how to build a personal practice and to learn from others. So I wonder if you would like to share with the audience what your personal practice is.
Well, first I sit every day and meditate on cushion. I guess at least 20 minutes is the minimum.
Early in the morning?
It can be any time in the day. Morning is good. And another practice that I do is the post-meditation. So, for example, like this year on Mount Everest, just before going to the summit, I totally lost my motivation. It was the day 3 or 4 before summit day. So everybody was leaving to the next higher camp. And I decided to stay in my tent, and I was really like completely depleted, totally lost my motivation. So I just pause. That's what I do. Instead of getting stressed, and I just pause. And then I breathe. I'm breathing. Through breathing, I just slowly reconnect with my body and with sensations. And then I identify some needs. Usually we have some needs, either emotional or body or spiritual. So at that time, I think, I needed some rest and I needed some autonomy, like to feel, okay, I'm going to go on my own pace. So I decide when I'm going to leave. And so as soon as I reconnected with my needs and my motivation for why I'm going to the top, and my motivation this year, on May 22nd, when I was going to top of Everest, was to be connected to others instead of doing the summit again, like for myself, like for self-achievements. I was really committed to actually connect to others on the way. So as soon as I connect to my motivation, then I got completely re-energized, And then next morning, I just slept very early in the morning, and I just quickly make my way find a group ahead of me, and then I just went to the top with them, connected with others, and then I just sank. I'm just think why I take this time to thank you, is that it gives me like a sense of gratitude and joy that's connected to others. So I think it's also a nice way to stop and to end this practice is by feeling the gratitude. So it's like pause, breathe, reconnect, and thank. So I recommend this practice.
Can I just ask, were you doing that while you were walking up the mountain, or did you sit in a tent somewhere by yourself?
I sit in a tent by myself for half a day. So everybody had left, and I was one day behind.
I mean, it's a very nice story about kind of building it into everyday life, because we talk a lot about it's nice to sit on a cushion by yourself in your house with the door closed, but as soon as you get out into the war place of the workforce, everything changes.
Yeah, it's to give ourselves some time, just self-compassion as well. It should be part of our practice. But it can be any place in our workplace, like as we are walking to the door to the next meeting, we can find this time for pausing, breathing, reconnecting, and then thanking.
I mean, I just want to share, Marion and Prisca did a meditation session together before coming to the session, and I did want to join, but I couldn't join. But I was so admiring, because when we go to conferences, it can be quite stressful, and it's difficult to focus and really to enjoy the conference experience and get the richness. You need to have some, be able to reconnect with yourself during that craziness. So thanks. Prisca, do you have some thoughts to share on your personal practice?
So sometimes as a scientist, I get very, very busy, and I get a very busy mind. And I find for me the best way to really find the space in my mind to quieten down and before I can actually reconnect. So even before the stopping for me sometimes, which isn't natural, which doesn't come naturally to me, I do a practice that I would call not my business meditation. So I start with the motivation, okay, I really need a bit of time to breathe right now. And then everything that comes through my mind, so my thoughts, my feelings, the sensations I have, my phone ringing, my emails, I just say it's none of my business. Right now, the next 5, 10, 20 minutes is my time. And all the other things that are going on, it's none of my business. For me, that's a very, it works to really kind of settle down into stopping. And then, as Marion said, the stopping really helps to reconnect with the real motivation, the real inspiration, because it's so easy to get carried away with, for example, reaching the top, or for me, writing the next publication, but it's actually not about that. So that really helps to sort of, once your thoughts are settled, once your mind is settled, to reconnect to what is it that I'm actually trying to do here? What am I here for? And then when I really want to try and have more compassion, I actually imagine a kitten or a puppy. That really helps when I'm really tensed. Imagine having a kitten in front of me. It always helps.
Thanks. You had a question?
So science doesn't have an answer to that yet. That's actually one of the big questions that science on meditation is battling with now. What is the dose we need for it to be effective? And what is the quality we need? So my answer, and I don't know if Marion agrees with me, is 5 minutes is better than nothing. So 5 minutes of trying to settle down is already really great compared to not trying to settle down when things get stressful. No, you can even sit in front of you. I sometimes when I get really, really stressed and worked up, I can sit in front of my computer as if I'm working, focusing on the point below my screen for 5 minutes. So
I think this is better than going to the bathroom, which is what a lot of people do, actually. They sit there for 5 minutes. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Any other questions? We've just got a couple more minutes.
Do you find that thanks to meditation, your creativity has increased or expanded in terms of the ideas and your inspiration?
Clarity, definitively, yes. So space, more space give access to more creativity.
yeah, I would say the same thing. And for me also, the fact that I've really learned to listen to people because I can quieten my own mind. So I can make connections easier because I can really listen.
Anyone else with the last question before we go to the meditation session? Yeah?
If I can just comment on that, in science we speak about states and traits, and I think if we practice meditation on a daily basis, whether it's formal practice or informal practice, from being a state it becomes more a trait. We incarnate more those things that we're trying to train. It's like we get powerful at lifting things up, but we also build the muscle, and that's always there.
Do we have time for... Yeah? I mean, you actually had your hand up first, so I feel like you should...
Just for everybody, in my work, I ask the question, can we have a yoga class 1 hour per week, and they accept it. So perhaps we should ask for our company only for 1 hour per week. It's not a big investment for the company, and I think everybody can do it.
Yeah, often people are too scared to ask that question.
And also technology. I mean, there are so many apps on your phone that you can hook into very quickly and easily.
Last question for me. What age should one start?
So there is meditation programs for children now. There is a very good book I'm not sure it's translated in English, but definitely in French and in Dutch. Exactly. Attentive like as a frog. But I think it can start at any age. It can start very, very young, but also in our team we're now doing a study on people who are 70 years old. They're divided into 3 groups. One is learning meditation, one is learning English, and the other one is not doing anything in particular.
Okay, that's great. And one of the things I'm very excited about is apparently meditation is also counteracting the effects of aging in some studies or in some subjects, right? Good.
Yeah, so that's one of the studies that is hopefully going to add to that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give the floor to you, Marion. You're going to lead us.
I'm going to lead a meditation now. Well, first start by sitting comfortably, straight back, feet on the ground, relaxed shoulders, relaxed arms, Relax your neck. Close your eyes or keep them slightly open as you wish. Your hands on your knees, comfortably positioned. Feel the warmth in your heart. And now turn your full attention to someone you know personally who is now facing great challenges, emotional or physical challenges. Or if you prefer, you can imagine a young, vulnerable animal like kitten or patty or dog. So you know the pain that this person is going through. Exactly like you don't want this pain. This person doesn't want this pain. Connect deeply from your heart to this person. Imagine from your heart warmth spreading, embracing this person in front of you, just like healing hug, sending loving kindness to this person. May this person be happy. May this person be free from suffering and cause of suffering. May this person be healthy. May this person be in peace. See the smile on the face on this person. Keep the smile with you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to invite both of you to give a brief closing statement.
Well, when it comes to make a change in our world, it touches our inner peace and deeper tranquility. So it's something very personal. And to me, the missing link in all of our systems is compassion. And how compassion can help us actually to cooperate better, to do good, to be good, and to take responsibility as a leader. And actually, compassion is something that we can, or caring or altruism, that's something we can cultivate. That's the key message that I'd like to pass on.
I think I have nothing much to add to that other than that yesterday during the morning plenary session, the question was asked, how can we collaborate better? And how fear is sometimes a factor that really hampers collaboration. And I believe that compassion and cultivating compassion is a very powerful antidote to fear, which can help foster better collaborations and really inspired and deep collaborations.
So thank you very much. Like I said, it was a real pleasure to be in a group with the two of you, and thank you for being a very attentive and mindful audience. I hardly saw anyone looking at their phones, so it's just a pleasure, and thank you very much.